This episode is dedicated to Rob Tokars, Mugni, and Sig Tyro for becoming our newest Southpaw supporters and helping to make this project possible. If you can spare a few dollars a month, consider supporting us on Patreon. Not only do you get access to bonus content, but you'll also be supporting this entire project. If everyone who follows us were to support us with even $1 a month, this project could actually sustain my living and make this the only thing I do. Many leftist passion projects like this one have disappeared because the creators eventually had to make a financial decision whether to continue or not. The pandemic has only accelerated this timetable. I'm not just talking about myself or Southpaw. There are plenty of others who could use your support. There's actually enough of us to all support one another. We just never thought about it. Sometimes we just need a reminder. I also recognize many of you are also in difficult financial situations, and Paul and I appreciate you following us and telling your friends about us. If that's the only aid you can give, that's more than enough. Find links to our Patreon and our store at southpawpod.com. This is Sam.
This is Austin.
And this is Southpaw.
So I know you started training in martial arts really in earnest when you came back to the US, but was there a thriving martial arts scene also in the Czech Republic?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I still, when I go to the Czech Republic, I still train at an alternative gym. I have commercial gyms that I train at all over the world, and I have alternative gyms that I train at all over the world. And it just depends on the city, but Prague is a place where generally I train in an alternative gym because there are actually too many fascists in the commercial mainstream gyms.
And when you say alternative gym, do you mean more like these training collectives? Because I've done episodes with different training collectives before.
Yes, I'm very, I don't want to say very tied in with the European various training collectives, but I'm moderately well connected with them. And, sometimes when I'm in a city, I'll come in and I won't do a seminar, but I'll hold a special 3-hour training session going over techniques in certain gyms. And sometimes I just show up and I'll just train, with whoever's there, depending on what day it is. But yeah, I have a lot of friends who are part of the alternative training collectives throughout Europe.
Seems like also anything related to grappling is much more popular here. And all the European martial arts friends I have, they're much more involved in K1 or Muay Thai.
I think that, BJJ is popular here. MMA is popular here, in a way, I think the U.S. is having a Muay Thai moment. I think that in Europe, K1 is K1 is king. When I said that I'm a K1 coach, it's I'm a K1 coach by default because I train at a commercial gym that does have a Muay Thai program, but also most of their fighters and they have professional fighters and stuff like that at the gym, they fight K1. In Europe, K1 is definitely the striking sports king. So when I in the US, however, I think that Muay Thai is probably more popular than K1 at the moment. A lot of people that I train with here in Europe, they talk about how Muay Thai used to be so much more popular in Europe and how K1 has sort of taken it over, its popularity in the fight sports, at least in the stand-up striking sports.
But for Americans, how would you explain to them the differences in rules between K1 and Muay Thai?
I mean, I think it would have to depend on like the system, like are the like what the judges are looking for in that particular event. But I mean, I would say, I always tell people, like, if you're talking about, um, like beyond fight promotion, if you're talking about uh, like the specific rules of engagement with Muay Thai, then there's in K1, you can't clinch for more than 3 seconds. And K1 is much more like heavy boxing oriented, and like whereas Muay Thai is like a lot more focused on kicks and knees and elbows and clinching.
K1 doesn't allow elbows, right?
No, it doesn't. Like the only like thing in Muay Thai that K1 doesn't allow at all is elbows. Like clinching and sweeps are possible in K1, but they have to be done within like very short period of time. Like so if you're in K1 and you fall into the clinch, you've got 3 seconds to like execute your knees and like you know what I mean? Like and sweeps if that's what you're going for. Right. I mean, I don't know like if you know this or not, but for any of your listeners, many of them probably do know this, but if they don't, like K1 was dramatically altered was it 10 years ago because of Buakal? Because um at the time they allowed the clinch to stay for like a longer period, and Buakal became like so dominant because he would get people in the clinch and just like smash them with knees and they didn't know what to do because like stand up clinching is like really not something that any of the other like K1 styles that like kind of fall into the umbrella of K1 have. And they just had a fighter come in that was so dominant that they really had to literally change the rules about it. So yeah, since then there's a 3 second rule when it comes to clinching.
I remember that moment because back then, if you just called Muay Thai, K1, all of it kickboxing, nobody cared. Whereas now, ever since they changed the clinch rules, people are very adamant. No, no, no. I don't do kickboxing. I do Muay Thai
Yeah.
because that was such a huge shift. Yes, it involves kicking and punching, but that is such a huge aspect of Muay Thai. To take that away, you can't even consider it the same sport. I think that's how a lot of people felt afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think that there's definitely a lot of that, and I think that there's definitely like a lot of bitterness because especially since people are watching K1 like grow in popularity, and people who like Muay Thai, um, who are Muay Thai like practitioners, like don't like to see the art form that they care about like kind of like uh, be forced to like go by the wayside, you know? So yeah, that's definitely like I think was a big moment. And I think that like, nowadays I see that like, you know, if you want like in Europe, for example, if you want to train Muay Thai, like you've got to be very specific about it. Like there's not very many gyms that you walk into and like it's just a Muay Thai curriculum. Like the gym that I train at is amazing, and like the head coach, like this dude Tilo Schneider, is a rad coach. But like and they've got great fighters there. But like whenever I'm sparring and like I just like lock onto somebody in the clinch, like I would say like 95% of the time the person just like stretches their arms out like they're like, I don't know what this dude's doing. Like, what the fuck, what the fuck, what the fuck? And I'm just immediately able to just like dominate them because like they're like so just totally taken aback. Like, I have no idea what's happening. And it's really funny because usually the coach is like has to tell them like, no, you got to clinch with him. He's a Muay Thai fighter. And like these dudes don't have any idea. They don't know how to do it because they're gearing fighters towards the thing that they need to do, which is K1, like, cause they're competing in K1. Whereas like I'm not concerned about entering competitions in K1 necessarily. Like I will probably have a couple of K1 fights, but like I'm looking for Muay Thai fights, and I'm like old enough that like I'm 41. Like I'm not looking for like to become a champion or anything like that. Like it'd be amazing to get like a belt or a title or whatever, but like my goal is just to like fight as much as my pokey ass can until like like my body gives out on it. like, and to have fun doing it. So of course I'm going to take more Muay Thai fights because I don't, like I don't need to prove myself. I don't need to take a shitload of fights so that I can like, advance or whatever.
And it's not just the clinch, I guess, for people listening. The rules, if you look at it, it's not that there's the elbow and the clinch, but beyond that, also what makes them different is the judging criteria, right? And the aesthetics are downstream from the judging criteria. So, like you were mentioning before with K1, they emphasize boxing more because the judging likes boxing more.
Yeah.
Whereas in Muay Thai, they like kicks and varieties of kicks more, especially like kicks to the body more.
Totally. Yeah.
So then you have to like watching a lot of kicks versus, let's say you like watching more 80% hands and 20% kicks with K1, right? So it's also about catering to different audiences.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely true. Like, I think that like the thing for me that I like both, honestly, but like I prefer Muay Thai just because like there's just so much more diversity in the fight to my mind, like whether it be like with the amount of kicks and the amount of elbows and knees and like well with the fact that they're elbows and with the amount of knees and the clinch, there's just so much more going on in my mind than in K1. But like again, I do like K1. Like I'm not like necessarily a huge MMA fan myself, and I'm probably the worst when it comes to like um, paying attention to like fight sports like overall. Like I watch a lot of fights, but it's almost all on YouTube, and like they're always old. You know, it's like I'm not like paying attention to what's happening in the sport like every single day. Like I watch like I've got UFC Fight Pass, and like I mostly like use it to watch like the Muay Thai stuff, like the like that they have there, and they haven't really added much to it lately.
Actually, in sticking with Europe, then moving from martial arts to music, there was a moment here where on the radio, they were playing a lot of music from the Czech Republic. And a lot of it was like rock and punk fused with polka.
Yeah.
It was this very like happy sounding rock music. So in your time in the Czech Republic, would you say that the Czech Republic had this kind of sound that also fused polka music, or isn't the Czech Republic where polka came from?
Well, I mean the polka. I think that polka, arguably, it's. I don't know if you could say that polka is from the Czech Republic or from Poland. Um, but like, okay, so Central European folk music sounds like that.
Ah,
So like, if you listen to Central European folk music, like you're going to hear the polka. And when you listen to like punk music and rock music that comes from those regions, you can definitely hear the polka. There's this phenomenon, or I don't know if I should call it a phenomenon, but there's a thing called Deutsch Punk, like Deutsche Punk, and it's the German punk scene from like the 80s, and it's very very oompa 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 oompa. Like German people don't hear it the way that, for example, like I hear it, you know, but like, or you hear it clearly, like, but like, if I say to a Czech person, like, that Vysocí zámek, like, which is like a famous, like, old, like, Czech punk band, like from the 70s and 80s, like, that was, uh, if I tell them that they sound kind of like Czech folk music or polka, like people will look at me like I'm a freak, because in their mind it's like the furthest thing from that music, but it really sounds a lot like that. Like, and because it's because of the meter, like the like and the like the bounce, like that it has is very like when you think of polka, you think of like ba 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 or ba ba ba, like, and it's really distinct in those like in several types of music that come out of that region.
so it's become such a part of the social fabric of music, and it's such a default that they don't even hear it anymore in their music.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like there are some people who listen to like Led Zeppelin and don't hear the blues.
Mm.
Like I think that that's the thing that happens when you disassociate something that comes from like one place. Like you just sort of uh, I don't know, uh, like there's a lot of things that are ostensibly like coming from a country or country music derived that like people just don't even think about, like as being a part of country music, like or coming from country music. Like, I mean, the Eagles are probably the most famous country rock band of all time. And I think that a lot of Eagles fans like have no idea that they're like considered to be a country rock band. Like it's like they just don't even hear it because it's like, they don't associate the things that they like with things that come from a different part of their culture that they've like tried to disassociate themselves from. You think about like one band or one like form of music as being sort of distasteful or like coming from a totally different, like even if you don't hate it, but it comes from such a different part of like your culture to your mind that you don't hear its influence on something that like is current. I'm not that the Led Zeppelin or the Eagles are current. I mean, I know I'm old, but I'm not that fucking old.
No, I think you're just giving famous examples because people do it all the time and they're not even aware of this unconscious bias that they have where they might be looking down on other parts of music and they don't even know.
Yeah, I mean, people are looking down on all sorts of shit because of unconscious bias all the time.
Yeah,
Like I
that's
mean,
true.
people are very unsuccessfully silencing their inner cop like uh constantly, like all over the world.
Yeah, I used to live in Oregon during the 90s and Beastie Boys was very popular there, but I lived in LA before, so I knew Beastie Boys as a rap group, right?
Right.
And so I understood that they also did other types of music. They did punk. But whenever I would mention to people I knew in Oregon who were all white, because Oregon is very white, that, oh, that's a rap group, they would just get so offended, which spoke to a lot of their unconscious bias about black music.
Yeah.
Which at the time, because I was young, I didn't understand what that was. But I was like, why are you so defensive about this? Why does this upset you so much? Right. I mean, if you don't agree, you just say, oh, I don't agree. But you're like getting mad about it, which says that there's something more going on, right?
Well, I mean, there's like, but even if like, obviously they're listening to like Check Your Head or Ill Communication, and
Yeah.
like, how do they not hear the hip hop in that?
Because they don't want to hear it.
They just, I guess they just don't want to hear it. Like, do you not hear the hip hop in Rage Against the Machine? Like, are you crazy?
Oh, that was like a big thing too in Oregon. So when I saw a lot of these like kind of alternative fascists showing up in Oregon, I'm like, yeah, I know exactly where that came from.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I lived in Portland for a couple of years also. Um, and so like I think it's always been really interesting to me because like I think that people think of and remember like I travel all over the world and like
Yeah.
I travel by van predominantly unless I've got to fly to another continent, Um like so I've seen the middle of every single part of the United States and a lot of other places as well. I I think that like the first time that like I realized how many Nazis there were in Oregon, like it was a little bit of a shock just because of the fact that like I in my mind had always associated Portland with like, the West Coast, like and I associated the West Coast with like the hippie movement and later on grunge, like so it just like it filled a specific space in my mind, but I was still in my teens by the time I realized like how fucking crazy it was there.
There are hardcore leftists there. There's a lot of hardcore leftists,
Oh hell yeah.
but I think all of them had to like deal with their own unconscious biases, right? And grow out of it. But it is a very white culture.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Oregon is a very white place, and there's specific reasons for that. Still, I mean, that I think affect like now. Uh, but like, it's an interesting thing because like where I come from, I think that maybe one of the reasons why it didn't shock me so much and that like it made more sense is because I come from like quote unquote cool city in like a state that nobody thinks is a cool state, but like the city like and I'm sorry Bloomington, like I love you and I love everybody that I'm like all my people in Bloomington, but like Bloomington has got its head directly up its ass about how cool it is. Like it thinks that it's this like very progressive like like left bastion of like culture and acceptance, but like it's in the middle of like one of the most conservative states in the entire United States, which means that like, like yes, it has a large queer community, but that community is constantly under siege, like by like, like right wing, like fascist chuds, you know what I mean? Like, and like that scene exists in a city that's small enough that like those people only have to do a few circles around the block if they want to before they find a victim, like a target, like, so like, you know, the privilege of believing that like our city is this amazing place is the privilege of like a, a white dude who like likes to pretend like they, you know what I mean? Like they're exceptionally woke too, like when really they don't see like the negative impact that like their perspective has and how much fucked up shit is going on that they just can't even accept because they're not on a level where they experience it, and they're not intelligent or empathetic enough to listen to their peers, like when they say, hey, this is a thing, you know what I mean? Like for them to go, oh, it must be because you're telling me, like, why would you lie to me about this?
Yeah.
It's like, it's, I mean, I don't know. You have to see this all the time. Like you see people who are like, I'm not experiencing it, so it can't be real.
I mean, running a leftist martial arts group and doing this podcast and talking to so many people, I sometimes call it leftist wolves or lefty wolves because, the iconography of the wolf is so popular on the right with chuds, right? I say we have our own version of that because we all come from this kind of macho, chauvinistic, reactionary culture. And so a lot of those traits can even replicate itself on the left. They might not be like that about everything, but they might not be aware, like going back to talking about unconscious biases, they might not be aware they're being reactionary in certain ways. Because sometimes they think of left politics like religion, like, oh, I've accepted left politics into my heart. So now I'm cured of every reactionary tendency I have. And it's like, no, it doesn't work that way. I still know a lot of leftist men who won't go to therapy because they're too tough guy.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that. Like, I think that like, I was always pretty like uh default femme, and as a result, like after years of like getting like kind of shit on for it, I tried to like switch over to like being very masculine at some point,
Ah,
which I don't think that it ever really like worked. Like I don't think I was ever fooling anybody, you know what I mean? Like, but like there was definitely a time in my life where like I wasn't willing to like accept a lot of parts about myself just because like I was so, I don't know, I heard it from so many people for so long, and I almost like, I don't know, I was like fighting against it because I didn't want it to fit because I knew that it like somewhere wasn't supposed to be okay. Like even when I was like, yeah, I'm not like homophobic, you know what I mean? Like, but I didn't want to like be like even like open about the fact that like, I like men sometimes also, like that I'm attracted to like, like basically like all different types of people, and that's okay, like that, like, you know I can like I had so many people call me names, these like, like these like very like definitive like signifiers of homosexuality, that like even though I knew that I was attracted to men, I couldn't admit it to myself because like, like I had them say it to me so many times that I wanted to deny it at times of my life. Like, because like that made me less of a man. Or even if I could say to myself, like, yeah, I like boys too. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't want to admit it outwardly as well because like I didn't want them to think of me as less than, like, I mean, and part of my personal like journey of like mental health recovery and like everything has been tied up with like me just like realizing it's like, like being able to be quiet about this is a privilege, and like I don't need it, like because like it's not helping anybody. In fact, it's harming people because I'm taking away visibility of another person who's open about that.
I always say, and this is something I'm talking about and writing about more, is how it's not just about radical politics, but it's also about being radical with yourself as far as like radical acceptance of yourself. You can't just do the radical politics in a vacuum. It also has to come with a lot of like internal work, healing. Some members of the Southpaw community call it radical softness because we're so used to being hard on ourselves, but
Yeah.
learning to just accept ourselves. And that in itself isn't a cure all. It's just talking about that there is this healing from trauma component to all this, to left politics. Or at least there should be.
Yeah, there should be. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. At least it should be that way.
Yeah, I don't know if it is, but it should be.
I think that it can be. I think that this is like, this ties back into like martial arts because like, a lot of people, I've been accused of like, like of making people feel bad about themselves or whatever because of my dedication. Or like I've had some of my fans be like, like, I don't like this. This is like hyper masculine stuff.
Oh, martial arts?
Yeah. And and I'm always kind of like, hey, like I understand that it's perceived that way. And like, and I do understand why you perceive it that way, because I think that like, with like with the dominance of like right wing, like politics inside of martial arts and attitudes, like, it's seemingly a very hyper masculine environment, and it can be, like, no question, like the commercial side of martial arts is very much entrenched in that like way of thinking and behaving, but like if you like approach it from the side of like of healing, which is the side that I approached it from, like, and if you approach it from the side of like I don't know, it's like the way that I approach like a new student when I meet someone for the first time, and I'm talking to them at the gym, and like I'm trying to make them feel comfortable, like I have protocols that like I go through, like if I'm showing them something, like like I try to like figure out what kind of stuff they're interested in so that I can like relate to that part of them. Like if I have to touch them to show them a movement, I ask first for permission. You know what I mean? Like if I can touch them. And if they say no, then I'm like, okay, no problem. Let's just keep trying it this way. Or I try to like, go around it. I try to find the place where I can like approach that person to make sure that they're comfortable enough that they can like start learning this thing. You know what I mean? Like, and then like hopefully that person eventually, and I see it a lot because these are people who I work with, like they and have over time, like they become a positive force in that gym or whatever gym they end up in. You know what I mean? Like where they're like doing these kinds of protocols too. And like, we can talk about like martial arts like and about this like from many different angles. I like to think of it as reclaiming it, like because I feel like many things the right has co-opted something that came from like the like proletariat, like that came from like working, struggling people to like basically cope like with like and combat the oppression that they were experiencing from those people. You know what I mean? Like, and that's been stolen from them. You know what I mean? Like, and in some ways, I like to think of it as like kind of uh, reclaiming it. Like because I believe that if you talk to people like on a way that like is fully with respect, and you come from a coaching angle like where you're talking to people with full respect and as if they're a peer, and like you're making sure that like you're being conscious of them and their body language and also like where they're comfortable, and you're not, you know what I mean, like overstepping any bounds, and you're not acting like a hyper masculine asshole, then like martial arts can be a place for anybody in many ways, and that it can be a place of healing for people who like are, I mean, what's the word that I'm looking for people who have suffered abuse, people who are not naturally violent, because I'm not naturally a violent person. I consider myself a pacifist. Like it can be a place for people like that, like for people who don't want conflict, for people who like merely like want to be able to know how to deal with conflict.
I think a lot of people don't realize or recognize, or maybe unwilling to recognize, that a lot of people come to the martial arts after the bad thing has happened, after the trauma has happened.
Yep.
There is a lot of hyper masculinity, but to say that's the only thing, or that's the only type of person that goes into martial arts, washes away all the people who are coming there to reclaim their bodies. And I think you see a lot of that with women in martial arts who go there because they're trying to reclaim their body.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that one of the most depressing things that I see in gyms is like when I see that woman walk into the gym and I see like the sleaziest piece of shit in the gym just immediately like be like, hey, you know what I mean? Like, what's up? You know, like want to work together, and like it's always this moment where I'm just like, no, and then
Yeah.
inevitably I never see that woman at the gym ever again. You know, like, or, you know, enter any, you know what I mean, like type of human being that might enter the gym, that they end up just getting paired with that wrong person on their first day when they walk through the door of that gym, you know, like, and then they just never walk through those doors again and possibly never do it again. And then they always have a negative like impression of it, which makes sense, but it like breaks my heart because like I know that there's another way.
A note to our loyal listeners: if you love the show, please support us and help us get paid for our labor by joining Team Southpaw on Patreon. By becoming a member, you'll get access to bonus content like exclusive articles, fight previews, bonus episodes, transcripts of fight studies, and access to our private chat group on Discord. But more importantly, you will help us supplement the cost of the show, the incredible time and energy Sam and I put into making the show, and you'll be giving us some breathing room not only to juggle Southpaw with our day jobs, but also expand Southpaw into other areas. Show your Southpaw solidarity by supporting us at patreon.com/southpawpod.
How did you end up teaching Muay Thai or K1, or how did you end up teaching, period?
I always knew that I was going to coach. I started when I was 35, and in my mind, I was like, I'm never gonna like be a fighter, right? Like, but I also very quickly like I had a lot of physical issues like that made it difficult for me to like do the movements. And in order to do the movements, I really had to work on them, which kind of gave me like I would say like a heightened understanding of like the body mechanic of say like the round kick, you know what I mean? Like, or, you know, any insert any technique there. It's like I had a hard time getting to it. So by the time I was like doing it competently, I put in a lot of work and had to really like think about why it was that I wasn't able to do it properly and then how to do it, you know, which gave me a capacity to talk to other people about how to do it. And I immediately saw them having success based upon the advice that I was giving, you know? And like once I realized that like I sort of had a bit of like, you know, more applicable knowledge than like the other like, you know, beginners or novices, I should say, that were at the gym, like, and I realized that I had helped a couple people, I sort of got addicted to it a little bit. Like, and I don't mean like that, like, oh, I gotta do this, but I just like, I was like, wow, I really like doing this. And so I just basically like set about getting as much supplemental training as I possibly could. Like, and that meant like doing drop-ins at gyms, like when I was on tour at whatever city I was in, so that I could like, if there was a coach that I really like wanted to learn from, you know, like, and making sure that like any of my friends who I already had who were like also training, that like I was like meeting with them as much as possible. And I was like living at the gym, you know, like, I mean, you know, and then I decided I would go to Thailand and train.
Tell me about that. What's training like in Thailand?
Man, well, I trained in Bangkok at a gym called Eminent Air, which is a very clinch heavy gym.
That's where your familiarity with the clinch came from then.
In many ways, yeah. I'd say because it's like every day, every session starts with 30 minutes of clinching. And so so I basically I've been training for 2 years and like, or yeah, I've been training for 2 years and like all of a sudden I was just uh, smashed into like 30 minutes of clinching with like top level, like, fighters in like like a really good, clinching gym basically. Uh, and yeah, that's where I learned how to do it. Like, that's where I really kind of got the bug, like to clinch.
At the beginning, was it really tough on your neck? All the clinching?
Yeah, I mean, not really, not in Thailand. I think that like most of my really like the sessions that are really hard on my neck are with like inexperienced Western people.
Oh, talk about that.
Okay, so like a Western clincher, like somebody who's not comfortable in the clinch is going to like wrench your neck around and like use their muscles like in the clinch, whereas like an experienced clincher like uses their muscles, but it's more about positioning. You know, I mean, you train BJJ, like it's like a lot of it's about taking up the space, like or creating space, so that you can take up the space that you want to. You know, and rarely does that require like full on ripping and tearing and like you know the bench pressing of another human's body for an extended period of time, right? Um, Most people who start out, they don't realize that like, you really want to just like use your strength like right when it needs to at that like last moment. Like you want to keep yourself active, like you want to make sure that like you're not like limp on people necessarily, like, but you're also not trying to like be using all of your strength. It's like, so yeah, clinching with Westerners generally, like, unless they're like really comfortable with the clinch, like, there's a lot of like, uh, twisting and turning and using all of the muscles possible. Whereas in Thailand, when you're clinching with somebody who's like a top level clincher, like it's really just like so flow. It's flow, like you're just moving together, and like every time somebody moves into a new position, like you just move your body into that position. You know what I mean? Like to like counteract it. And then you try to do something and put yourself into a place where you would like to be. And like, also like, like, experienced clinchers are going to throw a lot of knees, just as much as they're going to like, be moving position around. Whereas like, oftentimes like people who are beginning clinching, they're in such like fear, and they're in that fight or flight, space in their head, and they get so stressed out that they forget to breathe, and they get like really really like stressed out, and so it causes them to like, jerk and like move their bodies like in larger motions. um so yeah, I mean, uh and so they forget to like, I don't know, knee. A lot of the time they'll start like an inexperienced clincher will try to punch you in the clinch, which like I'm not saying that there's no space for punching or dirty boxing in the clinch, but like, generally like an experienced clincher is going to rely on like, like, maneuvering and like and timing of knees and like, and elbows, as opposed to like, trying to like, uh hit you in the gut with like a body shot that like is coming, has like no room basically to move.
When you show up in the morning, what time are you showing up and what's the training day like?
Well, I mean, I was staying at the gym, so like, I would basically get up and I would be awake for like 30 minutes, uh, and like I would just like, put on my shorts and go downstairs and like put on my sneakers and like start running.
That seems like a hallmark of all the gyms. The first thing you do in the morning is run.
Yeah, yeah, I think that that's pretty typical. But yeah, like I would basically like put on my running shoes and like run the like, whatever half a block from where like, the boarding part of the gym was to like the actual gym itself. And like I would go there and then like I would see who was there because I was almost always the first person or maybe the second person there when I was there. So like, uh, yeah, I would just see who else was there, and if there was somebody else there, we would start running together. And if there wasn't anybody there, I would start stretching a little bit and like, and then see if somebody showed up. And if they didn't, then I would just start running. So then it's like running. I would usually run like at least a 5K. Sometimes I would run 10, depending on like how active the gym seemed like it was getting. Because like, yeah, I would start at 7 a.m. and like technically the morning training session goes from like 7 to like 10 or 11, depending on like, who shows up and when they want to do what they want to do. And like, yeah, so, um, but everything hinged on like when the first 30 minutes of clinching would happen. So I would basically run and then I would run until like I like noticed that people were skipping rope. And depending on whether or not I wanted to skip rope for like 15 minutes, I would either continue running for a little while and then duck in for like, 5 to 10 minutes of skipping rope, or I would go in and skip rope for the amount of time that other people were doing it and then get ready and then go in and clinch for 30 minutes. And then clinching led to different stuff. It really just depends on like what they wanted to do. Cause I would go to the morning and the evening session and they would really moderate like what was happening on which one, because not everybody's going to like both, like, I mean, obviously like, if you're staying there and you're like a Muay Thai tourist staying at the gym, like probably you're going to go to like both sessions, especially if you paid for them already, or at least when you can physically handle it, because training twice a day for like 2 3 hour sessions is too much for some, like a lot of people, or maybe even anybody, I should say, uh, to do all the time. But yeah, it would lead to clinching would lead to either sparring or like your crew who was assigned to you would pull you out and you would work pads, and like then they would send you back into sparring.
And if you're assigned a crew, is that person your teacher for the duration?
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I ended up working with two crews while I was there. Actually, three, because at the end, a different crew showed up and I realized that I kind of liked him a lot, like, and so like I kind of like I gravitated towards him like the last like week that I was there. Um, but yeah, like I worked with like one crew predominantly, and then the Ajarn worked with me like he would work with me at least 2 or 3 times a week also. So I had mostly two coaches that I was working with.
And who is that?
Yeah, like Ajarn is a master, right? So like a lot of people, this is actually a funny thing. Like my gym that I train at in Bloomington is like delineated from an Ajarn Chai. He's really famous for bringing Muay Thai and popularizing it in the United States in like the 60s and 70s. He's like the head of the TBA, the Thai Boxing Association, that has like the huge tournament in Iowa every year. Um, anyway, like he's 80 something now, like, but his, like a lot of people don't realize, like, even at my school, they think that that's his first name. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm just like, no, he's Master Chai. like, and it's so funny because like people who have been training with him, like for years, they don't know anything about Thai culture. They've been training Thai boxing in the U.S. You know what I mean? Like from this guy, and like they don't know that his name like is like they don't realize that Ajarn is a title. You know what I mean? Like it means master. like like they understand that crew isn't like it means coach. You know what I mean? Like, but for some reason they don't understand that Ajarn is like a master. So yeah, Ajarn is master, crew is coach. That's it. Long story short. Sorry for poking fun at my home gym. They earned it though.
So then, does the master try to work with all the people there, or was that something you set up with them?
I think that like the Ajarn like would work with more with like dedicated people. I think, like if I had to guess, probably, he just noticed that I was there all the time and that I was coming for like at least 2.5 hours every day. Like, I mean, every session, because like, some days, every once in a while, I would only come for like 2 hours at a session, but usually I would show up first and I would be one of the last people to leave. So I would be there for at least 3 hours. And like, that goes a long way when, like you're a Western doofus who's like, showing up and like, I'm sure that there are a lot of Muay Thai tourists who show up and like, they're not necessarily there to learn. They're there to train, but also they're there to like get drunk and fuck or whatever and do, like party and do whatever fun stuff they want to do. Like I literally like lived at the gym almost the whole time I was there. Like, I mean, I have friends who live in Bangkok, like that I know from like, like anti-fascist communities in Europe who moved there like to become professional fighters, like that I would go and meet up with and stuff and like hang out and have dinner with. But mostly when I was there, I was just like at the gym, like I would go out and like forage for street food and then like come straight back and like just be at the gym.
So does it break up into you run, you do clinch, you do some sparring, and then you do pad work? And is that how the class format is, or is there some other stuff on top of that?
Oftentimes, then you go over to the bag, and usually, like like the crew, your crew will watch you sparring, and then I mean, oftentimes, like I would be sparring, and like my crew would just be standing there shaking his head, just like in total utter disappointment, and then like pull me out and be like, oh yeah, blah blah blah, like do this, you know what I mean? Like, and show me things that they thought like I really needed to work on, which was everything. But like, and then after that, like they'd send me over to the bag and like, and basically tell me things that they wanted me to see predominantly while I was doing bag rounds. And like, and so I would do the bag rounds. And then some days they would be like, they would make us do core training also, like, so like numbers of work of like, sit-ups and push-ups and like and planks and lifting weights and stuff like that. But most of the curriculum, like while I was there, was like just running, clinch, like sparring, heavy pad rounds, bag work, and pretty much in that order.
I guess that's one aspect that can't be replicated here in the US is the personal attention. Here you'd have to like pay extra, so it becomes cost prohibitive, where then sometimes like it's the richest people end up getting the best training. And you see this all the time in BJJ. A lot of the richest kids, because they start young, become the best because their parents could afford all the private lessons for them.
Totally.
Whereas over there, their pedagogy is reliant on personal attention.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually one of the biggest things that differs with the way that I like I coach other people. And even like when I'm coaching at like a commercial gym, like I always try to to incorporate elements of like what I would do on a like at a training session in Thailand, at least some of the things. And one of the main things that I always try to do is like I try to at least get like 5 minutes with every student that's at a class, like where I at least like talk to them about like their strong points and also like the things that they need to work on and how to work on them and how to make them better. And then I also like I offer like free privates all the time. Like, I mean, like I will charge people for privates, but generally speaking, like, I mean, I have some young students that I like visit their houses and teach them, and like because they their parents don't have time to take them to the gym or whatever, and blah blah blah. Like, and I charge them, but like I literally like I charge like $15 an hour. Like I'm like it's $15 for an hour and like and 20 for an hour and a half. Like because I don't. This is like something that I have a problem with. Is like I hate the gatekeeping aspect of martial arts. Like I hate authoritarianism. Like I don't like hierarchical like structures. I dislike them intensely.
You don't like $1,000 private lesson?
Yes, I don't even like the $90 private lesson.
And I'm not joking.
No,
There's a lot of
I know
people.
you're not joking, dude. Like, I know, like, but like, like, I also don't do this for a living. Muay Thai is my hobby, Sam. Like, it's a hobby that I do equally as much as my career, but it's like, it's not my primary source of income or my source of income at all. Like, I mean, I make an extra $20 here and there, and like, I like, buy a couple of beers and some ice cream. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, that's not my source of income. Like, I play shows and like sell records and t-shirts and stuff like that. Like, that's how I make a living. And even when I do that, I try to like make sure that it's accessible to people. So like, I'm not like concerned about making money so much as I'm concerned about making sure that people get better, like, and that people are enjoying themselves and that people feel safe. You know what I mean? Like, that's like, for me, that's like the thing that I'm there for. And like, I just want for martial arts to be accessible to people. And like, and again, this like, comes back to like my belief in like assemblage politics, because like, I've got this skill that like, granted, I haven't been doing it for as long. I'm definitely not the greatest fighter. I'm not the greatest coach. Like, I will be the first to admit that like, I don't know everything. You know what I mean? Like, but like, I'm a person who has dedicated a very like thousands and thousands of hours over the last 6 years towards this thing, you know? And like, and so I have more knowledge than other people. And like, and I'm more than willing to share that knowledge with other people, because like, in the end, like, I know that they could potentially be better for having that knowledge, that they, like, could benefit from it. And that maybe eventually, like, they're going to teach me about some other thing that I don't know about. Like, I mean, my students teach me about things that like I never knew. And I say students, I actually shouldn't say students, because a lot of the time it's like a cooperative effort, like where I'm training with like other fighters and I just know about certain things that like, like they don't know yet, like, and I'm just like helping them, or I'm seeing things with a coach's eye, because like I've sort of formed my entire journey around having a coach's eye, you know, like, and I don't know, like they teach me things all the time. So to me, it's like an exchange. And even like the very first, like, I mean, I have an 8-year-old kid that I train, and like, I don't speak German very well. And like, and, he speaks to me in German, and it gives me an opportunity like to teach him in a language that like I don't have mastery of. So even, like, even that is an exchange. And in my opinion, in many ways, it's an equal exchange. Like, so the way I look at it is just that I'm giving something to somebody else, to other people, to a community as well. And that community is giving something back to me, even if they don't realize it. Like, even like the student that I have is like, that's like the first, like their first day walking into the gym. And I'm just like showing them like, how to throw a cross and a hook. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, even just doing that, I get something from it, because while I'm showing them how to do that, like, how to throw the cross and the hook, I'm thinking about the cross and the hook. So I'm thinking about how my cross and hook will be better, like in the future. And I'm also thinking about how I can better explain it to the next person that I have to explain those body movements to, like, and what makes this one person different than everybody else that I've coached so far. Like, what am I gaining from talking to that person? And like, how am I going to be able to help other people going into the future? Like, it's just, to me, it's so fully cooperative, and like, and makes so much sense to like everything that I believe in, that like, I don't feel like I don't know, like, I don't know, I just get so much out of it.
Because of Spotify and because everything has gone digital, how do contemporary musicians make their living off of music now? How did it used to work before COVID, and how is it working now?
Um, Before COVID, I played at least 6 months of shows every year, which would take me across the United States twice and to Europe once.
So you made your living from touring.
Yeah, I'm a traveling t-shirt and record store.
So it's not as much about digital downloads and
I mean, digital downloads are very marginal amount of money. Spotify is virtually non-existent. I mean, like I think you need like 6,000 streams. Like I think I make like, yeah, like $5 from 6,000 streams or something like that.
You need that many streams for $5.
Yeah, it's really like uh, the economy of streaming is really almost non-existent. Like in a lot of ways. Not saying that it doesn't exist because it is money, but it's like it's not a lot. I mean, I get some money from radio play, um, especially like in the UK. Like the BBC pays really well if they play something on the radio. Like they pay you like £50 per spin, and like that's like $70. So yeah, so like if you get like even 4 spins, you know what I mean, like on the BBC, like that's 200 and something dollars. Yeah. But so anyway, pre-COVID, lots of touring, lots of grinding, and then post-COVID, like streams. Uh, and I was lucky enough to be in Europe and be able to play some socially distanced shows at reduced capacity clubs over the summer. Um, but like my main revenue source since since COVID has been basically like uh, doing specialized stuff for fans. Like there was like during the first lockdown, I was offering like Zoom concerts for like single people, like for like them and their family, so I would like basically say like, hey, like I'll call you for 30 minutes on Zoom and I'll play the 4 songs you most want to like hear and I'll just talk to you, like, and people would be like, how much? And I'd be like, how much is that worth to you? Like, and some people were like, I can give you like 25, and I'd be like, cool, no big deal. And some people were like, I can give you 100, and I'd be like, awesome. And some people would be like, I'll give you $200, and I'd be like, awesome. Like, so like, no matter what, like it ends up working out because people end up paying what they can afford. Like, and I'm always explicitly like upfront about it. I'm like, look, like, I don't want you to pay me more than you can actually afford to pay. Like if you can afford something like this much money because you're, like because you have money and like, you're doing well and you're not like, worried about like where your next meal is going to come from or how you're going to pay your rent, then like, you know, then please, like, as whatever you can give, great. Like, but there are other people out there who I'm doing this for free or for almost nothing. And like, like if somebody pays me more, that subsidizes other people, like in my mind, being able to just like do it for somebody else, and also subsidizes me being able to play lots of online benefits where I'm not making any money at all, like, so um, I would say that that's like predominantly where my income has come from, though, is like playing online streaming events where people were tipping, or where like somebody, like where I was giving people a private concert on Zoom or Jitsi, and like, then I like, I did Valentine's Day stuff, which was pre-COVID, but like where I like played whatever somebody's sweetheart's favorite song of mine and like sent like a personalized greeting. It's like that's and I just did this thing with Christmas where I wrote 20 songs for different fans. And again, that was like sliding scale. So some people paid very little money, and some people like one person didn't pay anything, and that's totally fine. And then another person like paid like $200 for it. Like, and a lot of the songs are like kind of goofy songs. And I like asked the person who's ordering it, like, what's your relationship with this person? What are some of the funny things that you've done together? What do you want me to tell them, like, from this song? Like, if it's a love song, like, what do you want them to know? Like, what would you like them to know and have them hear me sing? You know what I mean? Like, what is it? And so, like, there's like criteria, and I just write those songs. And yeah, that's like thing that I do now in order to make money is like I just try to figure out like how I can like make my fans happy and like give them something that they, like other artists maybe wouldn't, and make sure that they can afford it. And like, yeah, that's basically it. Like um, it's just another type of like work, like rather than driving 6 hours to get to another show and then setting up and sound checking and like waiting for the crowd to show up and then playing and then tearing down, selling merch for, like an hour after the show and talking to everybody that like wants to talk to me at the merch table and signing everything or whatever, like instead of doing that, like I'm just online, like hanging out and, like, and trying to make sure that like, people know that I'm here and that we can be connected.
Being a touring musician sounds a lot like being an indie wrestler, where you just go from town to town, do a show, and then you set up your booth and you sell your merch and you talk and you sign stuff.
Dude, I think that it's very similar. I mean, I learned this very early from like, my proximity to like country music, because this is the thing that country musicians do. And I think that this is probably why like professional wrestlers do it too. Or like, like indie wrestlers, and also stand-up comedians. It's like if you don't show fan appreciation, then like in my opinion, like I hate any musician who like doesn't give of themselves to their fans. And like that means like if you're not like actually interacting with your fans and it's only a one-way thing, like where they're giving you something, you know what I mean? Like they're giving you revenue and you just get to show up and do the thing that you like want to do, which is like get up on stage and get the adoration or whatever, and then walk off and like just do whatever other thing you want to do for the rest of the day. Like I just don't have any respect for that if that's what you do every day. Like everyone's got days where they just can't deal with it and they get on stage and they play and then they go and they get the hell out of there. But if like that's what you do every day and like you don't give love back to people who like are supporting you, like I just can't handle it. Like it totally fucking depresses the hell out of me and makes me dislike you as an artist. Like bands that stay in the dressing room and like never go out and interact with their fans, like unless you're at the level like where people are going to freak out and mob you and trample you, then like there's no reason not to go and say hi. Like there's just not like, and people like, I don't know, people love artists that they've latched onto. And there are people who overstep their boundaries. There are punishers, but even those people still deserve to know that like they matter, at least enough to like, be present, which is why like I try really to be present even online, which is exhausting as hell. It isn't always my favorite part of the job because I don't necessarily like living in my telephone, like, but like it's important, like in my opinion, one of the most important things that I do is to like relate to people and talk to them. Like I'm a musician because my dad is a musician and it's a thing that I was naturally like gifted at to start with and that like they fostered in me from a young age. But like the reason that I did it, like that I really applied myself in it is because it was like the only thing that like a nerdy kid that mostly got bullied, like got praised for. You know what I mean? Like it was the only way that like, people were like, paid attention to me and reacted to me positively when I was young. So like, so when I look at like my trajectory and my reasoning for like wanting to be like a musician, a big portion of that is the desire to be able to connect with other people and actually like interact with them. Like when I was at my worst anxiety, like the worst state of like my like anxiety induced depression and like crippling social anxiety, like the kind of thing where I was like running away from like crowds of people, like crying and like not being able to deal. One place where I was always comfortable was at the show that I was playing talking to my fans. It was like one of the only places where I actually got positive human interaction with other people. Like, so where I was in a situation where like I was kind of in control and they like wanted to talk to me. So the fact, like knowing how much people give to me and how much this like particular thing has given to me, in a lot of ways, it's like similar with like my attitude towards Muay Thai, I guess. It's like, I just like want to give back because like this is the thing that feeds me, like, and I want it to be accessible and I want other people, I want to be accessible. Like I want to be able to like have conversations with other human beings and like, and have an exchange of ideas and like, and friendship and human interaction. So of course I'm going to like show up to the thing that really provides that thing for me.
But something you mentioned earlier in passing was the types of fans, and you mentioned sometimes they're punishers.
Yeah.
What is a punisher?
I mean, a punisher doesn't necessarily have to be a fan. They could also be a music industry person. It could be like a band mate, even. Punisher is like someone who doesn't realize that like they're being intrusive and overly so, or that they're monopolizing your time. Oftentimes, like a punisher is very drunk, and like very like insistent that they like get a certain amount of face time with you and aren't aware of the fact that there are other people who are also trying to talk to you and like basically like kind of get in the way of everyone else. And then oftentimes they repeat the same thing over and over again. That's a typical characteristic of a punisher.
Is this kind of like terms for different types of people you deal with in the industry?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, like I say this, like, I know I've been a punisher before. Everybody, I think, is a punisher sometimes. There are people who are perpetual punishers. There are people who are perpetual line steppers, like, and those people, like, are difficult, but, like, they deserve like, in my opinion, they still deserve, like, to be talked to and, like, and to be treated with kindness, but they are more difficult. And this doesn't mean like, and I'm not trying to say that like for anybody out there hearing this and going, oh man, I'm sure I did this. Yeah, you probably did. Don't feel bad. Everybody does at some point. Everybody is a punisher at some point, So if you did it to me in the past and you're listening to this, it's no big deal. The next time we see each other, give me a hug and punish me some more. It's okay.
Something I noticed right away in listening to your music is your voice. So how did you develop your sound? I guess this doesn't just apply to your singing, but also your songwriting.
Well, I mean, a lot of people would say that I'm in the process of always developing my sound, which is something that like is typical for me, is that like I'm always kind of making my style new and different. Like every record that I do, I try to make sure that I'm not doing the same thing more, like again, basically. But the constant, I think, is my voice. And the difference, like, there's difference in my voice and singing in certain songs because, of course, different songs have different contexts. But my voice sounds the same pretty much. But it did have like a pretty drastic change in 2014 to 2016 in that time period because I quit smoking and like my throat started healing, So yeah, so like my voice started changing immediately, and my and kind of made me sound a little bit different. I mean, friends of mine were like, "Whoa, you got a new voice!" Like when you quit smoking, and I was like, "Yeah, I guess I did." And the reason is because I have so much more lung capacity and control over my like vocal cords now that like I just am capable of doing different things and. That I wasn't able to before. So my voice is just more expressive than it was. Like it was a lot more narrow in many ways, like in its capabilities. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't know, like I've found my style, because I knew that I didn't care to sound like anybody else. And like, there are a few people that I really tried to emulate early on. But once I realized how much I was sounding like them, I realized that I figured out ways that I could change what I was doing so that it didn't sound like them, you know? Like I would write a song. My favorite songwriter probably is a guy named Jason Molina, who unfortunately passed several years ago. But his bands were Songs Ohio and Magnolia Electric Company, um, and there was a time when I would write songs and I would be like, "Oh my God, that's just another Jason Molina song." And I would be like, how do you make this not a Jason Molina song? And I was just like, okay, tempo. Like, how do I make this song, like, take this song that sounds so much like this person who I revere, and I'm proud of the words and I'm proud of, like, the melody. How do I make it so that it just doesn't, like, you can't tell that it's so influenced by this person? You know, like, and I would just take it into a different space than, like, that person existed in. You know what I mean? So that's kind of almost a hallmark for me, like a trademark. I mean, like I take something that I think is something like something else, and I'll be like, how do I make sure that nobody can tell that this is like this? Like, and I'll like just mess with it and write it and rewrite it until like I know that the thing that I have is like pretty much completely original, you know, like and completely mine. Like, I mean, I probably like, I think it's now 6 times I've written the Sting song Along the Fields of Gold by accident. And like, you know, not necessarily an enormous fan of that song, like deliberately, but apparently my subconscious fucking loves it. Like the melody, I mean, not the lyrics. I've like found that that was like a melody that I just like ended up gravitating towards several times, and like I'm just like, why what is up with this? And so then I've got to take this song that I know sounds like something else and try to make sure that it just doesn't sound anything like that. And then not only that, but I got to make sure that it doesn't sound anything like the other song that I realized had somehow accidentally been influenced by this song, you know? So for me it's just like a matter of like invention and just like trying to be conscious, not self-conscious, but be conscious of the fact that like, you know, like if I want to make something that's like new, I've got to like work on it all the time until like it sounds new to me.
For a lot of people who enjoy singing, they often try to mimic somebody else. But do you think it's best just to like sing the way you naturally sound, the way you talk?
I mean, dude, I don't know, man. Like I think people should sing what they love. I think that people should do the thing that makes them happy. You know, like I mean, I've got songs, like I've got albums where like they're really full country records, and like you know, like or bluegrass records, and like my twang is like ticked up. You know, um, and it like it's not deliberate. It just like comes with the style of music. You know, but like if you love singing something and you want like, and in your mind you hear it's sung a certain way, like far be it from me to say that you shouldn't sing it that way. Like if you're doing something that makes you happy, like you should just keep fucking doing it. Like that doesn't mean that maybe that doesn't apply to people who are trying to professionally do something. Um, like if you want to professionally do something, the only piece of advice that I possibly give to you is just do it for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and just keep doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it until like you really know like what it is that you're trying to do. You know, like uh, that's the only thing I can say. I mean, singing and making music is like every other art, and that includes martial arts. Like, unless you like spend a lot of time pursuing it, like, then you're not going to be good at it, and you're not going to have your own way of doing it. You know, like it's like I don't know if you're a casual martial artist, like you know, like you probably have somebody who you really, really want to be like, and like you gravitate towards their like body movements, and like you're trying to like emulate those all the time. And don't get me wrong, like that's a really important part of like martial arts. Is like emulations. It's part of all arts and human interaction. Like you see something that you respect and speaks to you, and like you try to do it, you try to replicate it. But eventually, like if you spend enough hours, you take in enough different people's styles, and you learn to like accept that everybody else is doing something differently, and that like just because they do it differently than you, or that you've been taught to do it doesn't mean that it's the wrong way to do it. It's just like a different way of doing it. Unless you like spend just like a lot of time like working on something, you're not going to do it like the way that you do it. You're going to do it the way that other people do it because you're going to be caught up in emulating somebody else. Like if it makes you happy to emulate someone else, then like you should do it. Like you should continue doing that. But if you want to do something your own way, then you just got to like just keep doing it and doing it and doing it until like you find the place that's your sweet spot. That's a place that like only you do it.
So with your new album, Alive in the Hot Zone, what message would you like people to take away from it?
I want people to be more analytic about like the way that they pursue life. And I want people to think about like privilege, the ways that they have their own privilege, and how their life experiences, while are very much distinct to themselves and can be used to define the things that they went through, can't necessarily be used like to I don't know, to understand the things that other people have been through. And honestly, like I want to say like I hope that people listen to it and they realize that it like authoritarianism and fascism in all its different varieties, like and ways that it like rears its head in the world, like is something that must be struggled against, because like really that's the overarching theme, like is like dismantling systems of oppression, whether they be like personal, like oppression, like in the form of like self-doubt and like self-destructive behaviors of various different types, um and like, or they be like actual like constructs of oppressive systems that all of us experience in different ways, and that like we can't casually hope to see them like disappear because they're deliberately placed there, and the people who deliberately place them there and propagate them like want them to be there, and they're going to do everything that they can to make sure that they stay there. And you passively just saying like I don't, like that's wrong, if I just sit here and say to myself that's wrong, then eventually it'll go away and get better, right? And like I want people to realize that that's not actually a thing, and that like the closer that we come to recognizing that like changing the world does take self-sacrifice and self-analyzation, and like uh, that it doesn't require us to like hate ourselves for things we've done in the past, um, and that like it may require us to come to terms with some of the shitty behaviors that we have been indoctrinated in, and maybe some of the things potentially that some of us have done to other human beings. It may force us to like to be to come to terms with that on our own, and also to be held accountable for those things. It doesn't mean that like it shouldn't stop you from doing those things. Who is it that said it? Was it Maya Angelou or God damn it, I can't remember who said it. I knew like yesterday, and for some reason I can't think of it. But it's like, we are only doing our best until we have like new information that helps us to do even better. And like I want for people to be open to new information, and for people to know that if they have stopped learning, then there's no point in like continuing breathing, because like learning is one of the greatest things that a human being can possibly do. If you can learn something new every single day, then there's a point to being alive.
And you're right. That was Maya Angelou.
It was Maya Angelou.
Yeah. I know we talked for a while. Thank you for your time, Austin. Where can people find you and hear more of your work?
You can find me on social media. That's my Instagram is at Austin Lucas Music. My website is austinlucas.com. My Facebook is Austin Lucas Music, and my Twitter is Austin Lucas IND. Uh, yeah, yeah, you can find me there. You can find me on Spotify. You can find me on Amazon Music. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me anywhere. If you Google my name or any other search engine device that you prefer, you can find me by looking up Austin Lucas, and there will be many, many pages of information about me, which you can take in.
All right. Thank you, Austin.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sam. It was a pleasure being on Southpaw. I'm really grateful to have found this show. I want you to know that.
Oh, really appreciate it.
Now that's the show. If you enjoyed this episode and find this type of independent media worthwhile, please consider supporting the show on Patreon. We have a lot more episodes like this one in the works, but need your financial support to keep the show running. Even a few dollars a month goes a long way. No one does what we do, and it's all being funded by you, the listener. In return for supporting us, you'll gain access to lots of bonus content along with our private Discord chat. Even if you can't support us, there's a lot of free bonus content there as well. We also have an online store if you want to show your Southpaw solidarity by wearing our swag. You can find all pertinent links at southpawpod.com. And if you can't afford to support the show and still want help, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen. This makes it easier for others to find us. And don't forget to share your favorite episodes or the podcast itself on social media. Tell your friends. Until next time, goodbye.
Southpaw, hitting with the left. Southpaw, Sam, Paul. Southpaw, Southpaw.